I'm live. I cannot believe I just did that. I just deleted my reading of about 20 minutes ago. I don't know what happened there. So, rather than being annoyed about myself, I'm reading it again. I'm reading extracts out of Joan Marshall Grant's book, Speaking from the Heart. This is a book about ethics, reincarnation, and what it means to be human. She was a beautiful writer. She wrote 7 farm memory books, and then she wrote The Lad and the Lady, which is the last book I read. And I am continuing here. This is the 4th part, I think, entitled Evolution. And these are her jottings and notes she left behind. This has all been put together by Nicola Bennett, Joan Lair, and Sophia Rossa, who I think was her granddaughter. The idiotic hair-splittings of petty dogma, no follicle of which is rooted in reality, are exemplified in the subdivisions of the local churches, all misfounded in concepts which have no relation whatsoever in the fundamentals of ethical behavior. No directive towards evolution or devolution. In fact, concept at their most ephemeral. Truth leads to unity, error is disunity. If Homo sapiens is to survive as a species, and by species I mean in 3D form, which is a useful form in which energy can increase rather than diminish, Homo sapiens must learn from the millions and a half other species, which are designed for the same purpose, i.e. the evolution of energy, and pool their species' resources, as do all other wiser or rather less contaminated species. The concept of Great Bear, which pools the resources not only of the genera, but with special subspecies needs, or Great Eagle, etc., may or may not, I think not, have been glimpsed by Akhenaton, when he had the Our God concept. This might have been a magnificently benign directive, but unfortunately led to the disasters of monotheism. The worst of all my concepts, had bad enough when expressed as my mummy, my daughter, my wife, etc., but lethal when expressed as my God. The effects of this exclusive concept are too obvious to mention. Jews versus Gentiles, Roman Catholics versus Protestants, etc., etc. And in the acceptance of the my hearsay, all participants in this horrid rivalry have cut themselves off from the vital wisdom which could be available to each and every individual member of Homo sapiens. The wisdom contributed to great man by those individuals who, since this species was created, have fulfilled the purpose for which their form was conceived by their superiors, i.e. the development and therefore the evolution of the energies condensed into this particular type of form. Homo sapiens is rapidly becoming a failure, an experiment which did not fulfill the hope of its artificers, who thought, apparently with unjustified optimism, that with our increased potential for intellect, a wider framework of potential concepts would lead to a comparable increase in emotion and sensatory experiences, and therefore to a more rapid and more benign growth of spirit and a greater beatitude of flesh. Homo sapiens can only begin to fulfill the intentions for which it as a species was conceived when it realizes that it cannot survive until it uses the resources inherent in all other species, i.e. the recognition that it is a species which either proliferates or becomes extinct due to the basic fact that it either uses or discards the experience of the best specimen of its kind. Any member of a species which recognizes its duty to the species as a whole must first be fully aware of itself, both as an individual with specific needs and a lively contributor to the welfare of the species as an entity. The individual bear must contribute the knowledge of how to catch and use for food a salmon, when previously a bear had not put a paw in the water. Before that individual bear can become a great part of Great Bear, as bears are brighter than bureaucrats, once a bear finds this useful new trick, bears have a so-called instinctive drive in certain environments to take fish out of the water. Man has got either to contribute to great man, or his extra attribute, intellect, will cause him to become as redundant as the dodo, so far as his chance of being an effective vehicle for energy in evolution is concerned. There are specific subdivisions among types of bears, according to their environment, but all draw on the wisdom contributed by all bears to Great Bear. It is sufficiently sad that the subdivisions of Homo sapiens do not recognize that their skin color, etc., is also only a product of the environment for which they were designed, and that they therefore do not call on the source of information so easily available in Great Man. But it's not only sad, but a travesty of true insight that is almost ludicrous, the laughter which tries to hide grief, that the puny shield of intellect attempts further to hide men from themselves, i.e. their integrals, by concepts. And what are concepts nowadays? No longer the habiliments of the horizon, but the tawdry togas by which each man tries to hide from his fellow man his desire to be invisible to great man. Only when men think of themselves as members of a species will they evolve as a species, and increase the scope both of themselves and the resources of their environment. I am a man, therefore I work for the evolution of man. I am the child of my environment, therefore I will honor my ancestors, the rocks, the plants, the animals, and so be able to say, the desert flowered, and where there was a stagnant swamp, sweet water flows. The effect of a species on its environment is a sign of the evolution or devolution of the species. For instance, when engaging in the various types of extrasensory perception, I sincerely believe that I had been able to remember a time when my basic energies were small enough to be fully employed, organizing a single molecule. I feel that already I was deeply concerned with keeping the distance between three atoms which comprised me, a single molecule. The enormous to a human forebrain adapted to working in a scale of 70 years and 10, give or take away a few decades, time lapse which this concept involved was overwhelming, but empirically I knew that the experience was subjectively valid. Creation. There is a Volunteers for Earth program. Earth has become such an unacceptable planet that no one volunteers. Me, being stubborn, remembers the artificers, in brackets, who made the complexity of flowers, birds, etc. This was not at all necessary. Succulents, etc. would have done, and peacock tails were an extravagance. But we believe in beauty. What can you do with what you have got? CF genes of a peacock, perfectly competent to lay an egg and sit on nest and reproduce the species. But let the artist come in and say, but what could you do with that energy? Feathers to make the tail, etc. The object of the exercise is not utilitarian. Make this an of us thing. When a peacock's tail was first made in 3D, and very difficult it was to get it into 3D, and they sat around with energy like living water in their hands, composing a peacock and living color, green, blue, etc., and the space, how to spread your tail, and the down here are so stupid that they think the peacock did it. It was hoped by the artificer who created the form called Homo sapiens, one of the tens of thousands of millions of 3D forms in which energy can evolve, that the capacity for conceptual thought would be an addition instead of a substitute for the full use of the five senses in a three-dimensional planet. Remember that in the long pattern, man on Earth is as trivial as an experiment as a school of 100 children in the backwoods of Maine, or anywhere else on this tiny island, Earth. But Homo sapiens has failed to use his capacity for conceptual thought as an addition to his other acquired capacities. He has used them as a substitute, and so having thrown away his compass of direction, his innate sensory awareness, and thus his sensibilities, he has created a conceptual society with a capacity for self-destructions, such as this small universe to which I belong has never seen before. The cry I, Joanne, often cry in despair, "There can't be as silly as that," is an echo of what artificer Homo sapiens cries as he sees the intolerable idiocy of his creations. And I must repeat, artificer Homo sapiens did not create the energy that belonged to no one, and is a natural force which takes form only when directed. Artificer Homo sapiens hoped, his now losing hope, that his species, which he loved very much, for the hands of a man are a more efficient means of bringing down energy into 3D than the hands or hooves of any of his fellow artificers. His capacity for sight of things not immediately relevant to his survival are potentially wider than the forms made by his fellow artificers. A zebra sees a daisy in the field as either a source of nourishment or a plant to be avoided. Homo sapiens can, so his creator hoped, become closer to his creator by noticing the sheer pleasure in the creation of the arrangement of petals, the color, the scent, the feel of the petal in contrast to the feel of the leaf and of the stalk, the different sound and quiet heart pulse of the roots as it spreads through the soil in which it grows, and the subtle music the daisy roots makes with the slight sharper sound of a grass root, the tiny variation and melody of an urgent poppy seed, which quickly sheds and sprouts, and the slow, deep rhythm of an oak tree, whose time span is not so short, but he is older, like the breathing of an elephant, slow and deep, but with the deep lungs, which can blast forth a blazon of energy if anyone is impertinent enough to try to hurt those under his protection. And I'll stop this here, and the next chapter is entitled Adaptation. Have a lovely Saturday. Today is the 13th of July.